In this 10-year anniversary edition of Nintendo Unboxed, we're going to be revisiting the Family Computer AV. If you're interested in seeing my original unboxing video for this console, you can click the link to it in the description of this video. So the Family Computer, or Famicom AV. This is a hardware revision for the original Famicom released in Japan in 1983. And this one came out around 1993, 1994, 10 years after the initial release of the console. And that seems like almost after the fact, but for whatever reason, video game consoles, particularly Nintendo ones, seem to have a much longer shelf life in Japan than in other regions. I believe that Nintendo ceased production for the Famicom in the year 2003. That's 20 years of Famicom. So this hardware revision came out kind of right in the middle of the console's lifespan. And that was nothing new. We had already seen several hardware revisions to video game consoles throughout the years, with the Atari 2600, the ColecoVision, the Sega Master System, and even Sony and Microsoft are doing that today with the PlayStation and Xbox. Most times hardware revisions are done in an effort to reduce production costs, and hopefully the companies will pass along those savings to the consumer. Sometimes with hardware revisions, features are cut, sometimes they're added. I would happen to say that this Famicom AV is leaps and bounds an improvement over the original. And we see that reflected in its name. AV stands for audio video. And the reason for that is the original Famicom released in 1983 had only RF, or radio frequency, out for the audio and video signal, which was not of very good quality. Having a direct connection with composite video cables was much better at the time. So that is the main improvement with this Famicom AV. And as we take a look at it, we'll see some others as well. So right off the bat, we're going to notice some different packaging here. This packaging, I've often wondered if this is a knockoff that I have here, just because the packaging is so different from this aesthetic here. The fact that it's a box, there's no styrofoam block, it just seems very different. But it is indeed a genuine Nintendo product, just in a different type of packaging here. So we've got the AV branding here, letting us know that that's one of the first improvements. And then pictured is one of the other big improvements, which are the controllers. Quite a bit of difference in the shape. And new to the Famicom was the idea of detachable controllers. We see the very same controller ports that we had been enjoying on the Nintendo Entertainment System in the United States and other regions of the world since that console came out. So Nintendo ditched the idea of the hardwired controllers in favor of detachable ones. Another very, very welcome change. So on this long side, we've got the branding and the same photo. On the short side, just some text with the branding, and then we'll see those aesthetics repeat on the other two sides, along with the barcode here on the left side. On the bottom, we've got some diagrams here explaining how you would be attaching or hooking up your Famicom AV to a computer. Either with the AV cable, there's a mono and a stereo variant, or the RF switch. With the RF switch, however, you would need to have an adapter. We wouldn't see that type of adapter for multi-out to RF until the release of the N64, I don't think, when the multi-out became the standard for Nintendo consoles. So I think on the back of the box here with all this Japanese text, it's also letting you know that you're going to have to purchase your AC adapter and your audio video cables or RF switch separately, because none of that's included in this package here. All you get is your console and two controllers, which was pretty standard fare in Japan for the time. However, a little bit of a difference here and a benefit to the Japanese model is you get two controllers. When this version of the NES would make its way to the United States, you would get only one controller with it. So let's open this up and see what we have inside. pretty much what we saw on the outside. We've got the Famicom AV and the 2 controllers and a couple pieces of documentation, including an instruction manual. So we've got the warning about AC adapters that we see with lots of the Japanese Nintendo hardware. The manual still do have that Famicom family logo there. Lots of Japanese text and diagrams for making your connections. How to connect your, or just a diagram of the controller, not quite how to connect it yet. But that would connect to these ports right here. And the EXT port for other peripherals. Remember, that was necessary for the original Famicom because the controllers were hardwired, so you couldn't unplug the controllers to plug in a light gun or anything else. So this EXT port was included on the original Famicom, and it made its way to the Famicom AV as well. It's diagrams for making your connections with the AV cable, with mono audio and stereo audio. How to insert your cartridge and turn the system on. Looks like we might have some troubleshooting information here. Warranty information perhaps. Yeah, this warranty shall be valid only within Japan. And then the back here. It looks like this particular one has a sticker from the store that it was purchased at. That's my best guess as to what this panel on the back of instruction manuals in Japan were for. I got the store information there, and then of course the sticker with the serial number that should match with the sticker on the actual console. So let's see if that's the case. Should be, since the last time I unboxed the Famicom AV 10 years ago. Turn it to the back or bottom here. We've got HN10586-479. We have a match. So that's what we get on the bottom here, just a sticker with the serial number and the model number. Turning it over to the front, we have an aesthetic almost more akin to the US Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Rather boxy in its design, but still very flat. It seems Nintendo kind of took some cues from the North American Super Nintendo Entertainment System for this redesign of the Famicom AV. And it's funny that they're kind of going back to the original branding here with the full name, Family Computer, and then that logo. So here we've got a power switch and a reset button that presses in. That's more like the Super Famicom. With the Super Famicom you had a switch and a button. With the Super NES, both of those were they slid up, even though the power was a clicky switch. And then the reset slider just it was spring-loaded and came back down. One thing that you don't get, this is an omission for cost saving most likely, there's no LED here to let you know that the system is powered on. So that's one drawback to the system, but I think the pros way outweigh the cons here. How do you tell that the system's on? Well, your TV's on and you see that it's on, or you have to notice that the power button is in the raised position here. Or power switch rather. So you just have to be observant to know that it's on. But you've got your cartridge slot, and we will see for the first time in Famicom history no sort of eject mechanism. I guess at this point Nintendo decided that that was no longer necessary, and since it required extra parts to make and the goal of the Famicom AV was to cut costs, the eject button was a good thing to omit. And we would see that on the final version of a Nintendo console with cartridges, the N64. That had no eject mechanism in any region in which it was released. But what we did see come over were these controller ports from the Nintendo Entertainment System in other regions. So that was a welcome addition to have detachable controllers. But like we saw in the instruction manual, there still is the EXT port for things like the light gun. So you remove the cover and then you've got that multi-pin port to make those connections for those peripherals. On the back here, all we have is AV out and DC in. So you'd make your connection there and then hook up the cable to the corresponding ports on your TV. So also included in the package here was the redesigned Famicom and NES controller. let's take it out of the bag here. This is the same dog bone. That's what this controller was dubbed because of its obvious kind of shape of a dog bone. This dog bone controller was released alongside the redesigned or top loader NES in the United States around the same time. And this would be one of the first times we notice some unification in branding. Notice this controller doesn't say Famicom anywhere except the back here. Family Computer Controller. And then it's got that family, little logo that they have there, that Famicom family of games. But this would be a naming convention we would see carried over with the N64, where Nintendo tried to unify more the aesthetic and the branding between Japan and other parts of the world. So this is more of a general Nintendo controller. It is comfortable. They responded to complaints of the sharp corners of the NES controller kind of digging into your the palm of your hands. The D-pad itself is a little bit more rounded here, not quite as sharp. The A and B buttons, I've always had a little bit of a gripe with the way that they're angled. The Super Nintendo Entertainment System got gamers really comfortable to using the Y button as the B button, and then the A button, the B button, which was below it, to jump by using your knuckle. So if you would hold the Y button, and actually I have a Super NES controller here that I can demo with. If you're playing Super Mario Brothers, you're holding Y to run and then to jump. You just have the B button right there. It's really, really comfortable. Don't have to move your thumb at all. So we really got used to that with the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Then with this redesigned Famicom or NES controller, you're kind of left to rocking your thumb back and forth, which doesn't work quite as well. I think if they had just taken this this raised portion and rotated it the opposite way so that the buttons kind of went from the upper left to the lower right, that would have been a much better layout. But that aside, this controller was pretty much an upgrade from the original Famicom controller, although you would lose the function of the microphone. So that second player controller had a microphone on it. But being able to detach your controllers was a really nice feature. However, the Japanese version still has a very, very short cord because the convention was sitting in front of your TV with your console next to you. So there you have the Family Computer AV. I hope you enjoyed this unboxing video, and will stay tuned for lots of other content that I have coming at World of Nintendo, especially my 10-year anniversary of the Nintendo Unboxed playlist, where I'm reshooting several of my earlier unboxings in an attempt to upgrade the video quality a bit. So the calendar for those releases has been on the screen, so definitely stay tuned for those and everything else I have coming for you from World of Nintendo. Until the next one, take care.